and founder of Something or Other Publishing, Wade Franson is the host of Created in the Image of God, a series that examines the role of religion in society, from messianic returns to the emotive responses transmitted through our culture. Wade fearlessly addresses reality claims from all directions, objectively exploring their compatibility with Holy Scripture. Tonight's episode, A God Shift, with Shayna Rattler.
Good evening, everyone. It's 8 p.m. Central Time. This is Created in the Image of God. I'm your host, Wade Franson. Very excited tonight with a very special guest hailing from down south, Dallas way. It's Shayna Rattler. Shayna Rattler is the founder of A God Shift, and she shares her mission tonight on how to cultivate a powerful community of women leading in media and the marketplace, equipping them to harness their influence and authority to uphold Christian values and advance God's purposes while guiding them to mobilize others to follow the same path. A very important topic. We are in need of strong women leaders who come at this from a spiritual perspective. We're going to welcome Shayna into the studio now.
Hey, Wade, how are you?
I'm doing just great. I have been so excited waiting to actually have this show. We've been talking for weeks. We've done the sneak peek. I've gotten to know a little bit of the depth that you bring to this topic, the passion, the commitment, and I cannot wait for us to share this with our audience today.
Oh, no pressure, no pressure.
Well, we were joking right before the show, and I said, this is your 451 plus media appearance, right? Because you said over 451. Yeah. So I'm sure you're well capable of handling that pressure. And in order to understand where that strength comes from, as we often or usually do on the show, we're going to dive into your own creation story. We want to know what the forces were that shaped you. I mean, I think it was Jeremiah who said that God said he knew Jeremiah in the womb. Yeah. So what ground were you planted in? What were the conditions of your early formation of the tender young shoots and plants that was to grow from the seed that was Shayna Rattler? Tell us a little bit about your origin story, including, your parents, whatever you want to share.
Yeah, so I was born in a little town called Jacksonville, Illinois. Most people only think of Florida when they think about Jacksonville, but I promise you this was nothing like Jacksonville, Florida. It's a small rural town of about 19,000 people in central Illinois. And I was born to a white mother and a black father. And so while I know a lot of mixed people who have like the best of both worlds in the terms of like they have an entire white side of their family and they have an entire black side of their family. Well, I have an entire white side of my family, but growing up, I was predominantly with my dad's family. And so on my white side of my family, pretty much the only people that I knew was my grandmother and my mother and he was technically my step grandfather. However, he was the only grandfather, that I knew. And so I think I have a very unique upbringing, a very, very much so Southern roots. And so my dad's family was from Mississippi. They moved to Illinois when my dad was in like 7th grade. And so even though I was born and raised in the Midwest, I was raised very, very Southern. And anybody that's listening right now is probably going to be like, oh, I could tell she was from the South. I always had a little bit of a twang, but I didn't move to the South until I was 21 years old. But I think that kind of pronounced it even more, that kind of twang that you guys are hearing. And so I was raised in the house with a big mama. Anybody from Southern culture probably is familiar with a big mama or a Madeir or something like that. And I was raised around old people. I was raised around my aunts and uncles. I was taught to cook at the age of 6. I could make homemade biscuits by myself from scratch at the age of 6 because that's what Southern women do. My grandmother told me, if you don't know how to do these things, you won't have a husband. And I was like, I'm 6. And if these are the things I have to do, I don't want one. So that gives you a little bit of insight into how I was raised, kind of the mind frame. I was raised from a child to be an adult. I wasn't treated as an adult. I was still made to sit at the children's table. I was still not allowed to participate in adult conversations, but I was groomed to be an adult from the time that I was a child. And so I've always, as a result of that, been extremely mature been well versed, because I was a Black girl that grew up in a predominantly white town. My town was 8% anything other than white, not 8% Black, 8% anything other than white. And so I find that now I find myself to be a very well-rounded person because of, my DNA is mixed. My environment growing up was mixed. And I think it has contributed a lot to the roundedness, if you will. I'm a little bit funky, I'm a little bit fancy, I'm a little bit free, and I'm a little bit sophisticated, kind of all in one.
Well, was your father very comfortable in that environment? Because he was then a very much a minority in that world as well, growing up.
I
And
think
did he remarry? So then you were in
no. So first of all, my parents weren't married to one another. And so both of my parents, when my mother married for the first time, she was 45 or 46. Interestingly enough, I'm getting married in 47 days and I'm 46.
Congratulations.
Thank you. My father married for the first time when he was 48. And so no, and as a matter of fact, I think it's worth me noting, my father was the custodial parent. My parents separated when I was 6 years old, and my dad raised me. Not many young Black males that are raising children, let alone girls. So yeah, I guess my dad was very comfortable. I guess the question is how comfortable was my mom? My mom was the one that was a white woman dating Black men when it wasn't popular, when it wasn't acceptable, when it wasn't, all the things that most people don't think anything of today.
Yeah. And did that racial element in that kind of predominantly majority white situation, did that impact you in ways that you still carry forward, or how was that as you got to coming of age and began to maybe become more aware of some of those things?
I never noticed. I was always one of the most popular kids in my school. I was a cheerleader. I played sports. I always had a ton of friends. I was well liked on both sides. And so I never even thought anything of it. You don't see anything odd with what it is that you see every day. And so I didn't have any racist experiences. I didn't have people asking me. Now I did, I wasn't sure how well I would be accepted when I was a really young child. So when I was in kindergarten, I used to tell them I'm not Black. I just lived in Florida until now, and I'm just got a tan. And then I quickly realized, like in first kindergarten, they don't care what color you are. If you're nice to them, they think you're cool. You'll be a friend. So no, I never really had any experiences that I feel shaped me positively or negatively. I had a very positive upbringing and very positive experiences as a child.
Yeah. So what were some of the topics then that began to occupy you as you became more self-aware, self-conscious, through your teenage years and began to deal more with the adult world as an adult? I mean, I love the way you described those early years. We've tried to help our children also learn that it's not all about just being served in entitlement, but you need to help with the family chores, and let's have you cook dinner for us once a week, and from a young age, and bake. And we started trying to have our children learn that too.
Yeah.
But then as you began to come of age, what were some of the things that began to occupy your mind and your interests?
Anything I wanted to do. Like, I had such an imagination. My father tells me that I've always been an entrepreneur. I've always had an entrepreneurial spirit. I have a picture. I usually have it close by. But I have a picture of myself when I was 6 years old, and I was having a yard sale, and I've always been such a perfectionist. So I took the top off of a board game, flattened it out, and I wrote yard sale with a marker. Well, after I wrote it, I realized that the A in yard was the only letter that I didn't have that was capitalized, and all the rest were. So you can see where I tried to make the A capital like all the rest of them. The junk that was on the table, no one would ever want, but I've always had like this independent spirit. I've always had this make it happen spirit, create it, build it. And it was always met with encouragement. I was never, other than occasionally I would be told to sit down and be quiet because I was an excessive talker. But I was always met with encouragement. I was always met with support. I was always met with, you can do whatever it is that you want to do. And so I think that dates back all the way to probably 6 or 7. And by the time I was a teenager, I was working and driving and, doing all the things that most teenagers do. Not like that's novel, but I think I demonstrated such maturity as a young child that I was probably allowed to do some things as a teenager that maybe other children don't. Like, I didn't have a curfew. Now, I found out later it was because my dad realized that all the rest of my friends had a curfew, and he made me think that I was like having some type of special privileges, but he knew that I would be home anyway because everybody else did. But I was very much so allowed to do a lot of things because I demonstrated a level of trust and maturity at a young age.
Wonderful. I'm reflecting on that. I have a 16-year-old daughter who got her license a month ago, and we just had a curfew discussion.
Yeah.
And we just had our first sort of enforcement of that curfew. And yeah, it's interesting. I appreciate your input there. I'm going to have to take that back and chew on it a little bit because she's also very trustworthy.
Yeah.
But my thought there is that it could be helpful to her to just protect her from being in situations that might be a little bit beyond what she can reasonably manage and control.
Especially in this day and age. Obviously, I was a teenager in the 90s. There wasn't as much to contend with as there is now.
Yeah. Well, and I also was thinking about in terms of the driving and the independence, I've heard that today's generation, they don't necessarily even want to get a license.
I've heard that too, and it blows my mind. I couldn't wait until
Yeah.
I was able to drive.
Our daughter's the opposite. And I'm like, well, what are we doing that makes her so desperately want to get away from home? But anyway, but I think I'm looking at it more positively. I think it is just that, the world's her oyster and she wants to go experience it.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we're going to go to a quick commercial break. In this commercial, we're going to share with you a little video about one aspect of the work that Shayna is doing. And it's a quiz which we're gonna offer you to take. We'll share the link to that quiz later. We don't want you to go take it now because right after this commercial break, we want you to come right back and we're going to be digging more deeply into how those experiences that Shayna had as a very young person shaped the path that she's on now, the mission that she has, the zeal and the passion that she has in the work that she's doing. So don't go anywhere. We will be right back after this short break.
God is commissioning women leaders to uphold Christian values and change the course of history for His glory and to mobilize other women to blaze the same trail. Want to know what type of kingdom leader you are and learn specific strategies to impact change based on your type? Find out by going to kingdomtrailblazerquiz.com right now.
Not right now, but soon.
Correct.
We'll show the QR code a little bit later so you can see her website as well. And we'll drop the link to that quiz in the chat. So tell us a little bit about that quiz, how it fits into your work, and the things that you're doing now that you have emerged from that protective, encouraging cocoon that you described and emerged as a full adult.
Yeah. So back in 2018, the Lord shifted me from the marketplace to ministry. And at the fall of last year, so September of 2023, the Lord told me, Shayna, I'm calling you to raise up an army of women that is going to recover and restore what is out of place. Because I believe that oftentimes the very thing that we complain about, the very thing that we wish we could change, are the things that we're called to be a part of the solution. And I was starting to look at all of the rising trend of opposition to God that is going on in our homes, in our schools, our world at large. And I believe that the Lord is commissioning women in this hour to be a conduit to recover and restore what is out of place. And so
let me pause you right there because we didn't really explore at all faith as part of your childhood. Yeah. So how did faith play into those early formative years?
When I was young, I can remember my grandmother doing my hair and sending me to the corner AME church with a dime. I would hear her pray at night. I couldn't understand what she was saying. And when I would ask, she would tell me it was none of my business. But that was the extent of it. It wasn't until probably my high school years that I started going to church on a regular basis with like family, friends that you're spending the night with, things of that nature. But as a child, I was sent to church. I don't remember anything other than wondering why I have to give these people my money, because she would give me the dime, to put in the offering. We were Christians and we were believers, and we prayed when we ate and we prayed before we went to bed. But that was about the extent of it. Like us living for God was nothing that I saw at the forefront as a child.
Wow, interesting. So then when you mentioned you went into the marketplace, what kind of work were you doing originally before that call?
So I went to school to be an occupational therapist, and then I quickly became a business owner. I had a staffing agency. And so the bulk of my adult career after being an occupational therapist, I was a business coach. And I taught small business owners how to land corporate contracts and how to land corporate sponsors. Did a lot of leadership development, training, those types of things. And the Lord said, you know what? All those skills that I put in you to build the marketplace, I now want you to take those same skill sets and help me to advance the kingdom.
Wonderful. So now back to where I somewhat rudely interrupted you as you were describing that call that came to move and start doing that.
Yeah. So when the Lord said, I need you to raise up this army of women, I first said, I don't want to do that. Like, I was always very intentional, whether it was in the business or whether it was ministry, whatever it was. I always wanted this is probably the only time that it's appropriate to say this, a gender neutral brand, if you will. I never wanted to be just for women. I never wanted to be just for Black people. I always wanted to be like, no, I want what I'm offering to be for men or women, white or Black, whatever the case may be. So when the Lord said, I'm calling you to raise up an army of women, I threw my toddler tantrum for a good 3 or 4 minutes. And I said, I don't want to do that. And then after I threw my tantrum, I was like, okay, what are we doing? Let's go. And I started to think about, back to your question about how the quiz kind of came into this. I started to think about, when you're in an army, you don't all have the same position. When you're in an army, you don't all have the same strengths and you don't all have the same needs. And it's going to be the same with women leaders. And so what I did is I'm calling these women kingdom trailblazers, which is not novel. I didn't make that up. And I developed 3 different levels of women leaders that I see in the faith-based space at this time. And so when you take the quiz, you find out what type of woman, Christian, kingdom trailblazer or Christian leader you are. And then you begin to learn, after you take the quiz, what are the strategic next steps that you can take to see a change in the world around you based on your leadership type, because everyone starts at a different place. They're going a different place. They need different things. And I didn't want to just teach a general, here's what you do and how you do it, although there is some foundation that applies to all 3 types. I wanted women to be able to identify, where does the Lord have you right now as a leader, and then give them specific and strategic next steps based on their leadership type.
So what are some of the different types that women might find if they take that quiz?
So I'm going to give you the names of them, and it's not going to mean anything to you until you take the quiz. So you'll have.
I'm not going to take because I'm not allowed as a man.
You're not allowed as a man. Listen, men, I've got a ton of stuff for you on Instagram. Please don't take my quiz. You're going to throw off all my algorithms and stuff. Share it with all the women in your life. So you're going to find whether or not you are a influential, I hope I can remember these, innovative influencer, a powerful pioneer, or a dynamic difference maker. And it's going to be based on, just to give them a little bit of the appetite, it's going to be based on, are you leading at a local level? Are you leading at a much higher level? There's a number of different differentiating factors to determine what type of leader you are, based on where is your current sphere of influence and authority.
So it's not, based on like the Myers-Briggs,
No.
for example.
No.
It sounds like it's more practical and experiential, where people can reflect and respond based on how they've already expressed interest through their life and their action.
And the assignments and callings that has been given to them. Somebody just said, I'm not a female, but I still want to take it. See,
Well, we were joking about that, right? Now it's the forbidden fruit, but men,
yeah,
you
take
want to show leadership,
you'll only get so far, but take it. I don't care. Take it if you want. Nothing. There's no police out there that's going to prevent you from taking it, Joel.
Okay, so once a woman takes the test, then what?
Once the woman takes the test, they will receive an email that tells them what their type is. And then two things will happen from there. In the very first email, it's going to read, now I'm a Christian, I don't believe in horoscopes and astrology and all that, but it's going to read much like this is who you are, this is what you're doing, this is what you've experienced, this is what you fear, this is what you likely have already identified that you need. And then you'll be invited to, you'll continue to get other emails that will over the weeks that will give you more and more information about what you can do next. And you'll also be invited into a free Facebook community where there's other women leaders that have taken the quiz. And I do weekly trainings in there, provide free resources. Everything is completely free and it will always be 100% free.
Wonderful.
I'm not getting you in there to sell you something later, I promise you.
And then once women become involved and engaged, they begin to drink some of the valuable nourishment that is available through this and through the network that they become part of. What do they do with all this?
So the goal, you talked about this a little bit when you read my bio. The whole reason why a God Shift, which is my ministry and also the name of my podcast, exists is so that we can uphold Christian values and mobilize others to do the same. And so you're going to learn, how do you have difficult conversations with people that don't believe like you believe? And here's what it's not. This is not about creating something new. This is about occupying your space. So looking at where do you currently have authority and influence, and how can you integrate upholding Christian values and mobilizing other women to blaze the same path into what it is that you're already doing. So, I'm not going to teach you how to have a platform. I'm not going to teach you how to create something new. I'm going to teach you how to take what God has already put in your hands and steward it in a way that you can uphold. Because listen, I'm not the only one that's tired of seeing the rising trend of opposition to God that's going on all around us. And many people want to do their part and everybody doesn't know where to start. They're like, well, this is the business that I'm in. This is the area that I'm called to lead in. How can I have an impact on the chaotic culture around me when I've been called to do this? I know how to do this, but I don't know how to incorporate that. But I know that if we don't have that, then this world is going to continue to get further and further into a tailspin.
I'm loving so much of what I'm hearing. We, in addition to some of the things that that I do that we've talked about, we've established something called the Royal Falcon Foundation. And under that umbrella, we do youth camps. And we have one coming up here in a couple of weeks on our property up here in Wisconsin. And the theme of this year's camp is be the change you want to see in the world.
Yeah.
And this is a quote by Mahatma Gandhi. And it's representing, so we could talk about the problems and the evil. We could rail against the darkness, or we can light a candle, right? And the candle is more visible the greater the darkness.
Yeah.
A little candle in darkness provides a lot of light.
Yeah.
So we call our program experiential leadership, 10% talk, 90% action, right? We want to see it. We want to see what it looks like. We want to give you all kinds of different opportunities to show what it looks like.
Yeah.
Because we are to be the light of the world, not the loudspeaker of the world. Right?
That's right.
So, but the point is to highlight for a moment what the darkness is. One aspect of darkness, and there are many aspects of darkness, but one aspect of darkness is, rather than teaching our young people to be the change they want to see in the world, or to, as you're saying, define your sphere of authority, and I will show you how to be active within that sphere of authority. It's not about teaching you how to build a platform.
Yeah.
Well, so much of what's going on in higher education today is about how to create a platform and create divisive energy.
That's right.
and divisive attention to draw attention to your cause, which is usually putting the blame on somebody else,
Right.
right? Usually pointing the finger at somebody else as to all the things that they're doing wrong.
One of the things that I think we have to remember, and this is one of the best tips that I have of how are you a kingdom trailblazer, regardless of your gender. We have to remember that you can't change what you don't first love. And it's very easy to, when we see things that are going on around us that we don't agree with and we downright despise, that if we don't learn how to incorporate love and grace in with the truth, just like Jesus did, then we end up causing more division. And that's obviously what this is not, so I tell people it's not about creating something new. And it's also not there is this thing called righteous indignation that, I do want you to be stirred up. I do want you to be fired up. I do want you to be pissed
Absolutely.
off, right? I want you to be pissed off. However, I don't want you to be so dogmatic in your approach that you end up causing more division. And there are a lot of churches these days that, especially, and I'm just going to call it like I see it, I'm one of them, so I can say it. A lot of these Black mega church preachers nowadays have gotten so dogmatic with their social issues that they want to see happen, that they're really causing more hate and division, especially among the body of Christ, than what already exists. And that's not going to do anything but create more of an environment that we're already in. And that's not what we need. So you can't have all love and no truth, but you can't have all truth and no love. We have to learn how to bridge those things together so that we can have the change that we want to see. So there's some white ones out there too, so that we can have the change that we want to see instead of being more of a contribution to the current problem.
Amen. So we're going to go again to a quick commercial break. And when we come back, I want to ask you to share some of the stories about the impact you're having. Give some practical examples about some of the women you're working with. Talk about a few examples of what does that look like, right? And then how does that aggregate up and how does it scale? Because you've talked about an army of women.
Yeah.
And I want to dig into that a little bit more and talk about the change that is happening and the impact that you're having. And this is exciting stuff. And I'm so grateful that you're here with us tonight. So for the audience, don't go anywhere. We're going to look at a quick ad for a book by another guest that we've had on the show, Barbara Brehan, who is doing something similar, but in a very different way. And just thought that would be an appropriate one to promote on tonight's show. When we come back, we'll dig into the impact that Shayna and A God Shift are having.
In a world where faith takes root and blossoms, comes a journey of growth like no other. Blooming for Christ, a captivating exploration of spirituality and the remarkable parallels between a plant's journey and our own. Just as a seed must germinate to become a thriving plant, our spiritual timeline begins with a single decision. Through the insightful words of Reverend Barbara Brehan, this book takes you on a transformative quest. A journey of growth that echoes the stages of a plant's life. From the tender shoot of a young believer bravely facing the world, to the full bloom of faith experiences shared and cherished. As seeds of faith are sown, new believers are nurtured, and the cycle continues just as God intended. But the journey doesn't end there. As the plant matures, so does the believer, becoming God's chosen harvester in gardens of divine purpose. Reverend Brehan's guidance, rooted in scripture and wisdom, gently leads you through the seasons of your spiritual life. Join us on this journey of discovery and renewal. A journey that unveils the beauty of your faith and the transformative power of God's love. Blooming for Christ. Embrace your season of growth and let your faith bloom. Available now.
Welcome back. This is Wade Franson. This is the Created in the Image of God show. We're here with Shayna Rattler from A God Shift, talking about how she is empowering and supporting a growing army of women. And in this segment, we're going to talk a little bit about the impact that Shayna is having, and learn a little bit more about some examples of what some of the women are doing that have reached out through her quiz and through her program, through her channels, her podcast, or TV shows to work together on bringing God back into society in a powerful way.
Yeah. So I've seen a countless number of times with the women that I have been working with, just for a very short period of time. When the Lord gave me this vision in September, I didn't pull everything together and actually introduce it to the world until January. So at the time of this recording, it's only been just, the first half of the year. But what I realized, Wade, is that there are so many believers that have not been properly taught the kingdom mandate that is on their lives. And the kingdom mandate goes back to Genesis 1:26, when the Lord said, I'm going to make man in my image and my likeness so that they may have dominion. There are so many people that I work with, and I know it's not just women, but those are the ones that I've been working the most closely with this year, that we don't recognize that dominion piece. Dominion was mentioned 44 times in the Bible. And so I think that we haven't been taught the authority that we have, and we haven't been taught how to exercise that authority. So what ends up happening is that the very environment that we were created to dominate ends up dominating us. Whereas when we look at the dominion piece, when the Lord said that you'll have dominion over the birds and the fish and the so-and-so and the so-and-so, we were created to dominate everything in this earth other than other human beings. So that means our circumstances, that means provision, the resources, everything that is in the earth, we were given dominion and authority over that. But since we don't know who we are and we don't know why we're here, it's very difficult for us to have impact in our own lives, let alone the lives of other people. And the women that have taken this quiz, and the women that have been following me, I see a couple of them in the comments, they now recognize what it is that we have been equipped with. It's not just this great God and this pauper of a people that have no power. I like to say that I believe that the reason why Jesus was able to die, not why he had to die, but why he was able to die, was because the same power and authority that he had was passed on to us. Yet we don't go from glory to glory, like it says in the Bible. We go from challenge to challenge. We go to everybody else to pray for us. And I think the biggest impact that I've had is to help believers understand that you weren't designed for worship. You were designed for dominion. Now, is worship good? Should we do it? Absolutely. But we were designed for dominion. And when you talked about like how this kind of ripple effect in this army, the second piece of it is not just how do we advance God's purposes and kind of return the world back to that. It's how do we develop the skill set to mobilize other people to want to blaze this same trail. Because if there's only 40 or 50 of us, we're definitely not going to have too much of a ripple effect when you look at how large the problems are. And so I don't know that I have any specific examples or people have shared with me, but I do know that once I have equipped women and men alike to recognize that they actually have authority and how to utilize that authority, that they're seeing a change in their lives, they're seeing a change in their assignments, and they're seeing a change in the world around them in the areas that they have their own sphere of influence and authority. You're on mute.
I'm sitting here, thank you. I'm sitting here drinking this in, and I'm just kind of in awe at the way in which God seems to be weaving this theme in. Just last week, we had a gentleman named Paul Gibbs who has founded an organization in 1992 called PAISE, which is the Greek word child of the kingdom. And he explained that the vision behind the PAISE movement, which is now operative in 20 countries, is to engage men in particular. Now, he doesn't say that. I mean, his is gender, but he says men respond to this. Young men are responding to this in many countries because his is a gospel about the kingdom that is action oriented.
Yeah.
Must be involved in building the kingdom of God and kingdom work. And he's finding young men who with whom this resonates because they want to roll up their sleeves and get active.
Yeah.
They just want to wallow in their brokenness. They don't want to wallow in their need for forgiveness, right? Which we all have. This is absolutely a part of it. But they want to roll up their sleeves and work and do something and accomplish something. And I'm just amazed at how, this back-to-back, completely unplanned message around taking action. And I shared, about our program too, experiential leadership. So, and I love the way you tied it in with the book of Genesis and Dominion. I'll just share one more little thought. I've shared this, I think, with you and others recently, that when I began to study deeply into the book of Genesis, it was this word rulership because of the forbidden fruit and the so-called curse that Eve, would have a desire to her husband and he would rule over her. But I wanted to know, where does this idea of rulership come from and what does that mean, right? And I went back, and the first time the word rulership is used, it's that God put the greater and lesser lights in heaven to rule the night and the day. And I came to the conclusion that we retain our sovereignty, we retain our dominion when we submit to the light, whether male or female. And it was never God's intent that the man in any way, shape, or form rule over the woman ever. That was a result of failed relationships. That was a result of failed understanding, misapplied situations based on not following the guidance, not submitting to the light. That is a result that sometimes occurs or often occurs because when we don't submit to the light, we lose our dominion, we lose our sovereignty, we become enslaved and entrapped by the world around us, which is one of the things you were saying. How to take control of the world around us and exercise dominion only fully comes when we are freed up by not coming enslaved to the darkness, by turning away from the light.
That's right. That's right. You have to become more like the light.
So share with us, more about how you apply this with women, some of the aspects that you share with women about taking control, showing dominion in their area, and bringing God into it. How does one do that in a world that is seemingly desperate here in America, in particular, to change our country from being a country where we have freedom of religion to a country where we have freedom from religion, where religion is forbidden in any kind of public context?
Yeah. There's several things. I think one of the things that is most practical for anyone is to learn how to listen more than you speak and learn how to have conversations with people. Because when you're having a conversation with someone that doesn't believe like you believe, or even they confess to believe like you believe, but they're not living in a way that's, that's congruent with what it is that they say they believe, if you don't approach them properly, then it's going to be very likely that they're not going to receive what it is that you're saying. So I always tell people, when you're having a conversation with someone that you want to change their perspective on anything, let them start talking first. Because unless you're dealing with someone that is just completely unreasonable, when it's your turn to talk, they usually will give you the opportunity to talk as well, and they won't feel less defensive. I was at a women's event in April. I was in Georgia doing some media, and I was at an event with a handful of women while I was there, and a lady who was there, and she was talking about that she has a son who is participating in a homosexual lifestyle. And you notice I didn't say he is homosexual, because we have to stop using words that we don't align with, right? And so he was, participating in a homosexual lifestyle. And she's like, and I'm always telling him that he knows this. I was like, you have only been 3 words into your sentence, and I can tell you, you're approaching this the wrong way. Like,
I'm always telling him.
you're right, he knows. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so one of the most practical things is that we can look at how we have conversations with people to try to, because even in letting people talk and asking them questions, you really learn about what button is there to push, or what thing is there to uncover or to press into when you're having a conversation, to identify what it is that you think that they're going to be, the most receptive to. And so I think that's a very practical thing that I teach. But one of the ways that we can really exercise the kingdom authority that has been given to us by God is this wonderful thing that we have here below our nose, and it's called our mouth. We need to learn how to watch the words that we speak. I say, like my grandmother used to always say, watch your mouth. Like if I was saying something a little too flip, watch your mouth. And we have to make sure that the words that come out of our mouths are not contradictory to what it is that we're believing God for, or what it is that he's promised. I say this all the time, and I'll say it again tonight, that my spiritual father said that he and his wife don't even joke about things that they don't want to come to happen, because that's how powerful our speech is, right? And so if we want to see a change in the world around us, we first have to start learning how to make sure that our speech is in alignment with what it is that we want to see, even if what it is that we're saying is not really our current reality.
Well, instantly things come to mind, like in the beginning was the Word,
Mm-hmm.
and the Word was with God, and the Word was God, right? And God said, let there be light, and there was light, right? The word, the power of the word.
Yeah.
I also think of the Zoroastrian religion: right thought, right speech, right action, right? Our thoughts, our speech, and our actions must conform. And James, if any man could bridle the tongue, he would be master of all.
Yeah. What you notice God didn't say was, I don't want there to keep being darkness. I ask my son all the time, can you not just spend as much effort talking about what it is that you do want instead of talking about what you don't want? Because the way words work, the universe, and I'm not giving power to the universe. I'm not one of these people that,
Yes.
the universe, but God did create the universe, and it does have functionality. The way the universe works is that when you put words out there, everything around you conspires to see those words work. So even if you say something as simple as, I tell you, you know what, Wade, I just got a new barbecue grill and it was on sale for $20. And you say, well, by the time I get there, it'll be back up to 40. Well, it will now.
Yeah.
You just increase the chances that it will now. And so, God didn't say, oh, I don't want there to be any more darkness. He said, no, let there be light. And so we have to begin to learn how to command the atmosphere around us with our words, because faith and belief and all the things around us are voice activated, just like the Lord activated light in the world.
Well, I've had a conversation many times in which this situation arises. Let's just say, what would you like to have for dinner? And the next 3 things that are going to be said are always, well, I don't want this, and I don't want that, and I don't like this. That's not what I asked. What would you like to have? I mean, simple example, right? But it's kind of frustrating when you see that power. So what recommendation do you have to start changing that behavior in all of us?
You're not going to get it right away. I have been consciously focused on the words that I say for a solid 3 years now. And so I don't get it wrong very often now. But you're going to be more aware of it now that you've heard this conversation. And so what I say is that, Wade, I'm old enough to remember the Etch-a-Sketch toy.
Mhm.
Remember, it was red.
Oh,
It had
yeah.
little knobs on it. And
Love
after
that little toy.
lines, when you didn't want them there anymore, you shook them to let them, go away. When I either have a thought that comes in my head or a word that comes out of my mouth, I literally shake my head no and say, no, I don't agree with that. And then I replace those words with something that's more powerful. And again, you're not going to get it. You're going to catch yourself tomorrow going, oh, like 5 or 6 times, because it's a new muscle, and it's a new habit that has to be developed. And even in terms of what we think about ourselves, there's so much that we say about ourselves that is not empowering. And so I would say, write out some I am statements. I see someone said, I am the word, like I am powerful, I am this. And every time you say something about yourself that is the opposite of what you're trying to grow toward, you better have some truth to counteract the lie that you just said about yourself. Even our children that are not living the way that we've raised them and are not doing the things that we would want them to do, let alone bringing God glory. I'm not going to say, well, you're always doing X, Y, and Z, because that means that it's I've just already put the words out there that it's not going to change. And so just really, really become mindful of what it is that you say. And when you catch yourself saying something that is contradictory to what it is that you're believing for, or what it is that you've been promised, you can immediately, just like we can cancel, covenants that we've made with other things that we've done in our lives that we shouldn't have done, we can cancel the covenant we've made with our mouths as well by replacing it with something that you are in alignment with, something that is in alignment with what the Word of God says.
Awesome. So what led you to focus on this aspect?
I didn't pick it. The Lord said to me, for the years that your ministry has been in place, you've been dealing with people. Now I'm calling you to deal with principalities. And I said, I don't have any idea what that means. And it sounds big, and it sounds like something that I don't even know that I'm capable of doing, just like I didn't.
Wickedness in high places.
And so that's when I started to really spend some time getting still to find out exactly what that meant and what was going to be the assignment and the responsibilities that was going to come with that. And that's when I had that aha moment of, oh, all these things that I've been complaining about. Oh, all these things that I wish were different. He's calling me to be one of the people that is going to help tear this down. And then, then after that, it was just, I just used my business mind and my background and operations and, some of the other, natural skills that he's given me to start to think about how do I build something? Like, what do these people need to hear? What do they need to know? What is the format? All the things that you kind of think about when you're building something new. But I didn't want this for myself no more than I've wanted most of the other assignments that he's given me. I mean, because guess what? When I was teaching people how to overcome disruption, I didn't have near as much of a target on my back as I do now. But when I'm calling out these dirty politicians that are putting stuff in our children's schools and in our families' faces, when I'm calling out the way people are living, I mean, there's a target that is on my back. If you think, for those of you that are following me right now, if you think the comments that you see against me on the post or something, you should see my DMs. I've got them. I'm marked, and so, but I also know that I'm covered. And so I'm just willing to say, you know what? As long as there's breath in my body, I'm going to do what it is that he told me to do and trust that I'll be protected.
Yeah, so many thoughts going through my mind right now. The need, the bravery, the verse that immediately came to mind when you said principalities was that one, spiritual wickedness in high places.
Yeah.
And the darkness hates the light.
Yeah.
Right. And Jesus said, if they hated me, they will also hate you.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I'm, so do what happens when somebody that's working with you tries and stumbles and they reach out to you? What kind of advice do you give if somebody starts trying to put this into practice and then is experiencing challenges, and that moment where Peter's walking across the water and he takes his eyes off Jesus and he begins to sink in the water, kind of thing?
Yeah. I think that in most things in life, there's a few things that you have to do right. And, obviously it's different for every situation. I usually ask a lot of questions, like, well, what did you do? Like, what was the environment? What did you do? What did you say? What did you put in place? What did you, to try to find out where the breakdown might have been. And then, I see everything from communication to fear and doubt, because, that's the number one thing. When you make up your mind to want to do something good, especially do something for God, the enemy comes into your mind. Just like, that's why, right now we're in a war over truth, and we're also in a war over identity and authority. And so since Satan lost that identity and authority, and that's what he's after, he comes into our minds with doubt, just like he did Eve. Did God really say? So you get all fired up, like you're listening to me right now. You're like, let's go, trailblazers. And then the enemy starts tapping on your shoulder and putting doubt in your mind. And so I find that I have to remind some people, like, what did God tell you in Genesis 1:26? You know what I mean?
Well, the other thing that was running through my mind, and I lost my train of thought for a second, but now it's back, is if you're building something that has this kind of importance, and it has to be solid, it has to have a good foundation.
Right.
The foundation is integrity. It's also intellectual coherence, right? Because if you go off half-cocked, right? If you go off unprepared, if you go off unsure or uncertain, I mean, here's another one of my favorite sayings is, we don't actually rise to the occasion. We sink to the level of our training, right? So we have to practice this. We have to be prepared. We have to count the cost. Before it says, before going into war, you had better count the cost. And so clarifying our own thoughts, right? Getting our own story right on who we are. And that's why I love that you went all the way back to Genesis. But what else can you add around establishing that dominion, and how working for the kingdom? What is the foundation of that? Where does one stand so as to not paint oneself into a corner, to use another analogy?
Can you ask that a different way? Because I want to make sure that I'm answering exactly what it is that you're asking.
So I can think of a number of biblical examples that illustrate sort of this going off unprepared and causing a bigger problem, right? Yeah. To embark on a journey to stand up for truth, to stand up for God's role for us, for his purpose, to teach what the light looks like in a world where people can't even tell the difference between darkness and light. You will have a target on your back. How does one prepare to have those good words, those right words, and not get into trouble? Because you know the brutal attacks that will come from one wrong tweet, for example, one wrong statement, one word that, it says apples of gold. A word fitly spoken is like apples of gold in a setting of silver, right? Well, what if you don't have the setting of silver, or you don't have the apple of gold? You drop something dumb on a bronze platter in front of everybody.
Yeah. I would say that now is the time to study like you've never studied before, because you have to be prepared. And it's not just to be, prepared internally as the vessel that is doing the work, but the people that you're going to encounter and the obstacles that you're going to encounter, the very first thing that they're going to try to do is attack the validity of what it is that you're saying. And if you're not clear, I told my mother this. So my mother was forced to get the COVID vaccine and has been like deathly ill at times after that. And she was like, when I get well, I want to start a group. And I said, but you better know the facts. It can't just be you're fired up and this is what you want people to know of what they should do and what they shouldn't do, because people are going to tear apart your theology limb by limb. And so I can't tell you anything more than know the word. And I told someone the other day, you may not know it all overnight, but you may not want to speak on things that you have not studied well enough to be able to defend. Because if you can't defend what it is that you're standing on, you've lost before you've gotten started.
Well, and thank you. And I think I've come to a little bit of an answer for myself. So I'll share a couple of reflections that I've come to as I've listened to you and considered this. One is this saying, and I forget who said it, might have been Benjamin Franklin or somebody, I don't know, but better to remain silent and be thought a fool than to speak and remove all doubt. Right.
Correct.
So, and you mentioned earlier about dogmatic preachers of large mega churches, right? So I think one thing is we don't have all the answers.
Yeah.
We shouldn't come across like an authoritative know-it-all. We should be approaching it, as you said, with a listening mind and a listening heart, engaging in a conversation. That also makes us less of a target, because if we come out dogmatic, I'm guaranteed we don't have all the facts, right? Guaranteed, we don't understand everything. Guaranteed we're going to misjudge somebody. And Jesus said, do not judge. Whatever standard of judgment you use will be used against you. So I think going forward with an open mind and an open heart in a dialogue and a discussion makes you less of a target, right? You know what I'm saying?
I
Which
do.
is not to say, to take away anything from what you're saying about dominion and authority and our words. So purifying our own hearts and trying to remove hypocrisy from our own thought and our own heart, our own theology, if you will.
Yeah.
Right? Be open to what somebody is mirroring back at you, because they understand part of the truth too.
Yeah. Agreed.
And that sort of diffuses it a little bit. Just take out the dogmatism, take out the strident opposition, and approach it in, hey, come, Jesus, in the Bible it says, come, let us reason together.
Mhm. Yeah, because I don't profess to know it all. And there, we're all learning and growing every day. And, my hope is that we can come to a place where even some of your followers, if you will, if you see one of us talking about something and you know more about the subject than what we do, why can't you just go into the comments and
Like Mountain Men, it was Mark Twain, not Ben Franklin, that said that. Apparently it was Mark Twain. Thank you, Mountain Man 64.
yeah.
I
Why
stand
can you not,
corrected, thankfully.
right? Somebody out there knew. Why can't you go into the comments and provide more insight and more education rather than just like tearing down what the person said because they said green and it's really blue? You know what I mean? Like I hope that we can grow to the point that we can begin to do that as well, because I know what I know really well, you know what you know really well, and I may only know 50% of what you know 100%. And if you see that I get one little word wrong in the 25 to 50% that I know, can you not just come along and be like, I really love where you're going with this, and here's what I know, instead of just being, see, that's the problem with you people, you don't ever know it. It's just like it blows my mind that some of us are supposed to be on the same side. And it goes back to what I was saying earlier, that in whatever that is, whatever's causing that level of spirit to rise up, we're just causing more division than we are moving in a direction that's going to cause us to see change.
Amen. Well, I got so interested in this topic, I failed to go to the last commercial break. So we're just going to skip over that. We're sorry to the person who was going to have that promotion. We'll make it up to you in a future episode. But we're going to now just go to some of the comments as we did with Mountain Man. So thank you very much for correcting that. Any other comments, Shayna, that you see that you want to highlight?
I am able to scroll. I was trying not to read them while I was talking because I didn't want to get
distracting. Yeah. I'll highlight this one while you're looking. Just keep searching. But this one, early on, the faith vocabulary causes the user to be avoided, like the old woman with too many cats. This was when you were talking about women expressing their dominion. And I just thought that was an interesting analogy, how people are dismissed and labels are put on people. And, we just want to avoid that.
Yeah. So Steve said it's sad what's happening in schools, especially here in the States. And I was doing an interview a God, I was telling Wade, I record my podcast twice a week, so I interview over 100 people a year myself. But we were having a conversation, and I said, you know what? I said, I don't like what is happening to our children, but on the other hand, I'm glad that it's happening because people are now wanting to stand up and do something about it. There were many people, regardless of what side of the political line they were on, regardless of what their faith beliefs were, that were, you know, we lived in a time where it was like live and let live. Well, that time is gone. We're now in a time where it's live and let them rule. And I said, you know, although I hate what is happening to our children, I'm glad that it's happening if it is going to cause people to rise up and say enough is enough. And we weren't seeing that level of enough is enough mentality in my observation until children started to be affected. And I think that that level of let's get together and allow our voices to be heard in a way that is going to be received and impactful will hopefully create some level of model and open the door for us to have this same level of impact and change when we look at other things that are going on in the world that is just in opposition to God.
Absolutely. I'd like to share a perspective. So I went to school in Sweden as a child, fourth, fifth, and sixth grade. And it was under very unusual circumstances. Some of the listeners know the full story, but I was living with my aunt and uncle. Dropped in, not speaking a word of the language, totally immersed in Swedish society. And I didn't know a whole lot, but I knew more by the time I came back from having had that exposure. And one of the things I knew that there was this thing called socialism and that there was this thing called capitalism.
Mm-hmm.
And being, you know, a young child, not really knowing what any of that meant, when I came back to school in sixth grade and my teacher stood me up in front of the class and said, this is our new student from Sweden. I'm like, I'm not Swedish, I'm an American. Well, I wasn't really an American. I was born in Canada. And at the time I was still Canadian. But anyway, the point is this identity thing, right? So here I am arguing socialism as being better than capitalism in sixth grade. And nobody knew what I was talking about. Or none of us, you know, they knew even less than I did, right? So fast forward, I ended up in Europe as a young adult, and I was kind of had an anti-American feeling because in terms of economic systems, in terms of regulation, in terms of caring for the sick and the poor, there are certain aspects of a socialist economy that have benefits and advantages. But the problem with socialism is this. It is an ideology. It is a subversive ideology based on fomenting discontent for the overthrow of the established government and authority. That's what it is. It is a revolutionary ideology, not an economic system. And furthermore, it deploys seditious, treasonous ways to accomplish its goals by subverting the existing authority structure based on building discontent. Karl Marx established this around class systems. But when people realized that in so-called capitalist societies, and there's no pure capitalism, socialism, or communism, it's all a mishmash, a mix of things. But people realized that in successful Western economies, you could change your class. You could move up and down. It's not a caste system. It's not rigid. And I learned as a young adult living in Europe, in Germany, and Switzerland, and France, and England. I lived in all of those in addition to Sweden. And after 10 years, I realized the social mobility is just not there in a socialist economy. And I came back to America because of the social mobility. Well, of course, that has been changed. And I will be told, well, of course, you were socially mobile because you're white. So they changed it from issues of class, which are changeable. You can change your class.
Yeah.
And they made you unhappy about your race, which you cannot change. Right? So now they've made you unhappy and discontent about something over which you have no power, no control, no authority in any way to change. And you can blame somebody else for every bad thing or wrong thing happening to you. So this seditious discontent has been introduced. Now, why am I talking about this? Because it's sad what's happening in the schools. There
Yeah.
are many things happening in the schools. This is one of them.
Yeah.
These subversive, seditious ideologies are being taught, and our children are being taught to be seditious and treasonous in their thinking
Hmm. Yeah.
in all kinds of different ways.
Yeah. I've interviewed so many people in the last 6 months, and it's like, oh my God, every interview, I'm like, wait, there's one more thing that we have to be concerned about as parents these days. I'm so grateful that my son is 27 years old. We were talking about what's it called? Racial what theory? What's it called?
Critical race theory.
Yes, critical race theory, and what it is that is being taught, but how it's being packaged, that they're trying to make it seem like that they're not teaching that. And I'm just like, my God in heaven, everywhere I turn, I'm recognizing that there's another level of indoctrination and another level of just flat out foolishness that our children are being exposed to. It blows my mind.
Well, and I love that you tied identity back to the identity that we were given in the Garden of Eden, created in the image of God, which is inherent in how and why I chose the title for this show. That is our true nature. We were created noble, and yet we debase ourselves. We were created free and sovereign.
Yeah.
It says in the Bible, all things were put under our feet.
That's right.
And yet that's somehow evil and bad.
Yeah.
In today's society, it's evil and bad if you have authority, if you take ownership of things.
That's right. Who do you think you are?
And it's kind of a nihilistic worldview, and it leads to untold tragedy and torment. I mean, I feel so strongly for our children. We try to help our children work through it. It's another reason for the Royal Falcon Foundation and the youth programs that we have in this experiential leadership idea, to get them out there into the real world and out of these swirling ideologies that you can swallow, so long as they're not tested against reality in a way that you can understand the hypothesis and understand the conclusion of the test.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, what a tangled web we weave.
So Isaiah 5 verse 20. Now I have to look that up. Give me one moment. Anything you have to share while I'm looking that up, Shayna?
So I was just looking at one of the questions that someone just said. How are we able to pinpoint each and everything that comes up? I can tell you specifically one of the tips that the gentleman was talking about for critical race theory that I think applies for everything. They said you can go to your school, like the principal or the school board, and you can ask to see the curriculum that is being taught in the books that and other materials that are being used to teach the subjects. Because sometimes if you just think, oh, it's just social studies, it's just this, it's just that, you won't know. But when you ask, and they have to show you, you have the right as a parent to ask, they have to show you the curriculum that is being taught and the textbooks and other supportive materials that they're using to teach that. And oftentimes you will find there what is really going on. He also shared, like if you see words like oppression, marginalized, like some of these other words, they dress these things up to make it seem like they're teaching one thing, but they're really teaching other things. So you really have to not trust what you see on the surface and ask to see what is going on. The second part of the question was, how do you know what to address and how? Anything that you're uncomfortable about, use your voice. I say that one of the things that we can do when you're looking at some of the things that you want to change is get involved. And everyone doesn't have the qualifications, the money, or the desire to run for office, but that doesn't mean that you can't go to your city council meetings. It doesn't mean that you can't go to your school board meetings and have a voice, because I'm just crazy enough to believe that if there are as many of our voices as there is of the other side, we can get some things done and we can get something changed. So if there's something that you question, even an inkling of what it is, show up and let your voice be heard, and encourage the other parents in your neighborhood, the other citizens in your neighborhood, to show up at these meetings as well and do the same thing and demand that they give you answers.
Thank you, Shayna. I've just shared out on all our channels this kingdomtrailblazerquiz.com. Google that, look it up. That's the website. I also looked up Isaiah 5:20. It is the verse that I thought was being referred to. And there it is. Woe unto them that call evil good and good evil, that put darkness for light and light for darkness, bitter for sweet and sweet for bitter. It seems like today there are master's degrees being issued in this technique and this ability.
Just for the sake of being able to say it, like not even using any common sense, not even using any common knowledge or logic. You know, if I said it's good, if you remember when Obama was in office, and don't get me started on that, but when he used to say, if I would say that the sky was blue, they would say, no, it's not. If I would say the grass was green, they would say, no, it's not. And I think that that's what we're experiencing now with Isaiah 5:20. If I say it, you know, if I say it's good, then you're going to say it's not, just to say that it's not, without any validity or without any no, but I'm holding a book and I'm saying it's a book, and you just want to say, no, it's not a book just because I said it is. And you're more committed to being right than you are to really having a level understanding. Again, blows my mind.
One of the core principles that underlines this show is the independent investigation of truth, and to study and know with your own eyes.
Yeah.
Of course, going back to the Word of God and testing every thought, testing every idea against the Word of God is also a critical way to know, to pinpoint each and everything that comes up. And then, you know, prayer and asking for God's guidance and help to know wisdom. There, you know, there's these twin proverbs that are back to back, and I'm sure you know them. One is, answer a fool according to his folly, and the next one says, do not answer a fool according to his folly. And each one gives the reason why you should answer a fool and when you should not answer a fool.
Yeah.
And the wisdom is discerning how and when to address. We're also told to not grab a passing dog by the ears, right? That's another proverb, right? So, you know, it does take wisdom, and I think each of us has to go to God, and the army that you're, you know, wanting to build and create, you know, isn't Shayna's army, but it's God's army, right? It's teaching people to go seek divine guidance, stand in the gap, in the way that God wants each of us, and only each individual knows what that is in conversation with his own creator.
Absolutely. You know, like I said, these women, you know, the Lord is calling on women specifically in this hour to change the world for his glory, and they need a leader. And I just happen to be one of the people that he's asked to be the leader, you know, and I don't, there's some days that I don't have a clue what I'm doing. And it goes back to what you said about wisdom. You know, I have a saying, I don't care if I'm writing a book or getting ready to, I say, Holy Spirit, be better than me. Because some days I'm like, I have no idea what I'm doing. I'm just doing it, you know, and no 2 days look alike. So Holy Spirit, be better than me.
Amen. I want to just throw this last comment out there. I love that, because we're in the My Truth age. I love that that's being highlighted. I really don't like that term. I like to just simply change it to my perspective.
Yeah.
It's not my truth.
My truth.
Right. No, it's my perspective. You deserve to have your own perspective. You should have your own perspective. But to say my truth, it's like I will trust my alternative facts.
Yeah.
Right. I will trust my made up fantasy. No, you're entitled to have a perspective, and your perspective may well be right. But I don't think the term my truth is helpful to anybody at any time, anywhere, anyhow.
Correct. Everybody has there's your side, my side, and the truth. So that means your truth may not even be the truth. Yeah. I don't like that. I also don't like that YOLO. You only live once. You do only live once, but how you live matters.
Yes.
It's not a
Well, Shayna,
license to do
what
great.
an honor. What an honor to have you here. We are overtime, which happens a lot with the guests that we have because the guests are so interesting. And I'm so grateful to you spending this time with us and even a little bit of extra time,
Yeah.
you know, brimful and running over. Our cup runneth over with Shayna tonight. And we're very grateful for that. So we'll probably have to have you back to learn more.
I'd love to.
Any last comments before I do the final thing, which I have to do, which is talk about next week's guest?
I would just say, don't let this be another year that you sit on the sidelines and just watch what is happening. Now is the time for you to recognize that regardless of what your assignment is, regardless of what it is that God is calling you to do, regardless of how small your sphere of influence and authority may be, that there's still some form of action that you can take, because the dark side is not going to sit idly by, and it's not going to stop being dark because you refuse to let your light shine. And so let this be one of those years that you get in the game and start to ask yourself, and if you don't know what it is, inbox me and ask me, like, what is the one thing that I can start to do in the areas that I have sphere and influence in order to see some change for the glory of God?
Well said. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
So the last thing I have to do is talk about who we will have next week. And I was just looking, I thought we had a video. I do have a video of her first book. But next week we have a former British politician, the founder of the For Britain Party, Anne Marie Waters, who's written 2 books. The first of her 2 books was Beyond Terror, the Islam's Slow Erosion of Western Democracy. And her new book is called In Defense of Democracy, which she wrote and was published in November 2020. So right before January 6th, that famous, infamous date, she published a book called In Defense of Democracy. So she was ahead of her time then. That book has been released on paperback and Kindle. It's just been available in hardback. And we're going to have her on the show sharing why she resigned from politics, what she's doing now, how she's writing and providing input into a global political discourse around what is democracy. And why would we have this on the role of religion in society? Well, I think as Shayna pointed out, we are in a kind of war, and we do need to have God in our public life and not have God pushed off into the corners. So that's one of the aspects of democracy that needs to be defended, especially in this country: the freedom of religion, the freedom to have religion be an input into our societal dialogue. So we don't actually have that video, unfortunately, to play, but next week you're in for a special treat with Anne Marie Waters. And that's the show for tonight. And I hope you will. Let me put this up there one more time, right at the end here, the QR code for the quiz. And we'll end with that on the air. All you women out there, go take that. Men, stay away. Go reach out to Paul Gibbs, who was here last week. He's got something for you.
Correct.
Shayna, what a pleasure. We'll have you back soon.
Thank you, Wade.
That's a wrap for tonight. See everybody next week.